Hi, welcome to our very first reflective week. And we are honored today to be having a session that begins with the whole reflective week. And with me today are two members of my team, Dr. Justin Zephyrin, who is our faculty development specialist, and Mr. Javed Mohammed, who is our e-learning support specialist. I'm going to ask them to just screen themselves for the moment to introduce so you can see them, and then so you can see them waving to you. Very great. So we certainly have a very packed, and because of the time commitment, we certainly want to move straight. We want to begin by inviting you to subscribe if you don't know that we have our week from the 4th to the 8th, and there are different activities that we have planned for you. It's a packed week, but we are equally proud of what we are doing here. Members of the team have worked hard, especially Dr. Zephyrin, who worked hard behind the idea to conceptualize this. And so I want to thank him, particularly in spearheading and pushing forward that we push this forward. All right. So we have, for example, today we are speaking about the whole idea of reflective practice and action research, which is our first session, and we have that 10:30 to 11:30. Our reflective practice and peer observation actually is on Wednesday the 6th. We are inviting you to join us then. If you can join us, at least you can send 2 of your comrades or your colleagues or your peers to join us as well. You can also promote it for us. We have the analyzing student evaluation results, which is on Wednesday. And that's in a very meaningful way. We also want to introduce you to Qualtrics, which is our new system that we're using to collect student feedback. And so that's certainly, and on Friday, we have a new format called the UE Faculty Cafe. And in that, it's faculty-led sessions that actually just do very short showcases, not really full, of different ways in which we want different tools or approaches. And then on Friday, we have the Creating Your IT Portfolio session with Dr. Zephyrin and Mr. Mohammed. And so we certainly want to do that. Our speaker today is no stranger to us, and it's certainly a great privilege to have Dr. Dianne Thurab-Nkhosi, who is a senior program officer and head of the quality assurance UE at UE St. Augustine. Dr. Thurab-Nkhosi is a senior program officer, as we said. She's a graduate of UE and University of Sheffield in the UK, and she's a former faculty development specialist. She still is a part of our family, and we hold that dearly. She's a specialist in various areas in course design, action research, and with more than 20 years of experience in open and distance learning. She has taught at the postgraduate level and conducted training and online course development locally and abroad. She has published several book chapters and articles on a number of journals, and has served as a PhD supervisor, internal and external students. And certainly we know that, Dianne, we are honored to have you today, and we know the topic is something dear to your heart. And certainly we know that action research is certainly a systematic method of inquiry that individuals undertake to really look at their own practice, but reflection is key to that. And I'm so happy that Dr. Dianne Thurab-Nkhosi is going to lead us up in our reflective week. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thanks a lot for that introduction, Dr. Hill. And as you said, well, I'm still part of the CETL family, though outside of it. And so welcome everybody. I'm just going to share my screen here now. Give me half a minute. And I'm going to turn my video off because sometimes I get a little dips and so because I'm going to be sharing the screen, I'm going to turn the video off in a bit. So today, what I want to look at, and I'm saying action research and I've changed the title a bit because I'm making some connections. Even though I'm going to be talking about action research, I'm also going to be talking about the scholarship of teaching and learning. I'm going to stop sharing and share again. I forgot to turn my sound on, and I will need the sound for what I want to do. And it's not going to be a workshop, but more of a webinar and a discussion. And I'll be sharing some insights from using various videos. So the plan for today is for us to look at how reflective practice can be used for self and peer evaluation, okay? And I'm also going to make that connection with how action research transitions into the scholarship of teaching and learning. So that's my plan for today. So I want to start off by sharing a definition, of course, of reflection. What is it? And I know Dr. Hill mentioned it in his little intro, systematic, and I want to emphasize that word. When I'm talking through today, we're going to be looking at reflection as a systematic reviewing process for our teachers that allows you to make the link from one experience to the next. And the end point is the maximum progress for your student. So you're using that. It's like you're moving from one experience to the next, and you're drawing it together in a systematic way, with the end game being progress for your students. And so I want to ask you, I know that reflection is something that we probably do, even though we don't do it in a mindful way, but it's something that we do. And I'm going to take a quick poll, right? Some of you would have gone through training, some level of teacher training. So some of you might be familiar with what we call reflective models. So if you are, then by all means, when I share the poll, I want you to, so it's two short questions you're going to have. One, for you to say whether you apply critical reflection in your practice, yes, no, or whether you use a model, right? And you should be seeing the poll up now. Are you all seeing it? Yeah, okay. So I'll give you all just a minute or two to do that. And so it's coming up, it's coming up. We're still waiting on a couple people. Still waiting on a couple people. Okay, right. So let me just share the results. So we see that quite a few of you apply critical reflection in your practice. And in fact, we have people who actually use a model. So could you share what model you've used? Just, you know, just for our information. You could put it in the chat if you don't want to share yet. I know when we start, people don't feel comfortable yet, you know. So if you don't feel comfortable yet sharing, you could put it in the chat in the meantime, what model you've used. Because somebody said they've used a model. Do you use your own? Leroy is asking if you use your own. All right, we'll come back to that. So when you think about reflection, I want you to think about pausing, right? We stop and we consider our actions in an attempt to enhance the practice. And so when we think about the pausing, look at that cycle. So you're saying that you pause, you self-assess, you think about it, and then you go into your practice. And then the cycle starts all over again. And here I want to pause and share with you a short, a 2-minute video. But before that, I want two persons to share with me how they pause right now and think about. I'm giving you a minute to think about it and share with me how you pause now. How do you pause now? And then go into that practice. Some people do it in all kinds of different ways. So I want two people to share. And I don't want to have to call names. Some I'm hoping that I'll get 2 volunteers. I know it's early on in the session and people not warm yet, but I'm hoping I'll get 2 volunteers. If I don't get 2 volunteers in a minute, then I'll call me.
And just for clarification, pause as in when you stop to assess and then get back into it, or after the, okay.
Exactly. So what's your process now? What do you do?
For me, I'm a note taker, so I always try to document things. It may not be normative or standard, but I like to, if I do pause, I like to see where I am in the process and if there's need for improvement. And improvement doesn't mean anything scientific or hard. It just means modifying things so that they work and bring about an end result.
Right.
It's not perfect, so I am just sharing my personal.
That's what we want. That's what we want. So you stop, you take notes, and you say, hey, maybe this isn't working. Let me try something else next semester. Yeah. Good. I'm seeing Kathy in the chat saying, as part of the course review process in the semester, subsequent to delivery. So at the end of the semester, Kathy, what do? Do you just sit and think about it? Do you write, as Camille said, she takes notes? What's your process?
Well, I think Camille had a good suggestion about taking notes during the semester. But in terms of looking at the overall, what happened overall, we take an overall look in the subsequent semester. So after everything has come in, we have all the assessment results, we have all the student feedback, we have all the performance in the other courses, because in the case of my program, we have tightly linked courses. So sometimes the factor might have been something else that occurred in our program. And then we take a overarching view at that point to try and figure out what may or may not have happened.
Okay. And so I mean, so
we have a written form. We actually have to write it out. So we reflect and then we write it out.
But yours is written out at the end, not as in Camille's case, as she progresses.
Yes, because one of the challenges with during delivery is that it's sometimes we find it difficult to distinguish. So sometimes, for example, I went into class Monday and I only had a third of the class there. I asked the class reps if something was an issue, which is why everyone was absent. The class rep said to me that they were not aware of a circumstance. I may not find out what the circumstance for that great absence was until the end of semester, when I will hear the story that something was due in another course. Okay. And so students choose to absent themselves. So sometimes you observe something, but you really don't know. So you have to wait until the end to reflect. But I mean, I would make the observation, I just wouldn't reflect at that time.
Right. And I'm seeing in the chat, it's quite interesting now where you have different approaches to it. So you have Darren who's saying that they pause as an exercise for the class where everybody does it with the students. And we'll talk about the role of the students in reflection in this session as well. I've seen Javed is saying it's self-talk anytime, anywhere. And Ladena is intermittent check-ins as well, like Camille. So you have your process, and as we go through looking at some of the models, you're going to see the relationship between what you are doing now and what some of the models are saying you can use as ways to process and to do that reflection. So I'm just going to share a quick video, just 2 minutes, talking about what is reflective practice, because we've talked about how you do it, and some of you are probably thinking, and what you're going to find with this session too, what I want to do is to help you see that some of the things you're doing, you can validate with the theory, So we're going to listen to this video, just 2 minutes of it. Hope you're seeing my screen now. Yes? Y'all seeing the screen? Yeah.
Yes, we are.
All right, so here we go.
Hi, I'm Dr. Ray Middleton. In this training course, my aim is to increase your skills and confidence to facilitate group reflective practice sessions. Reflective practice involves pausing to share and reflect on the ideas, thoughts, values, and emotions which underlie our actions, in order to develop our knowledge and skills in a continuous process of learning. Just experiencing something does not mean we'll necessarily learn from it. To learn something, we need to pause, reflect and examine it from a few different angles. It's a way to bring together and close the gap between theory and practice in order that we develop insights into ourselves, others, and improve the way we work and our confidence. Sometimes this is called experiential learning as opposed to learning just from theory, head knowledge from books. We're remembering an experience and critically examining it to say what was good about it and what could have been better. In order to develop a better understanding and skills, we need to reflect on what we're doing in the light of some theory about good practice. Some reflective learning can be done on our own, such as by writing in a reflective journal or a diary, or writing blogs about our experiences. However, in my experience, there's a real limit to how much I can learn reflecting on my own. And I can learn significantly more by opening up a dialogue and reflecting with other people. This is because they can see things that I cannot see, like the back of my head. In order to develop better understanding and skills, we need to reflect on what we do and be honest about it and hear other people's point of view.
Right. So you see some of the things that he brought up that some of you shared, you know, that idea of, you know, sometimes it's better to not just share, reflect on your own, the importance of documenting, journaling, writing, the help process. So those are some of the things that he mentioned, you know. And as I said, we all go through a process of reflection, go through some process of reflection. It's part of the teaching activity. And even if you're not trained as a teacher, intuitively you feel, oh, I must think about this and I must see how I can improve. Now, I just want to go back to some of the formal models of reflection, because it's gonna, what I'm gonna try to do is kind of set the context for you, the framework for how you think about reflection as you move into action research. And so I'm gonna share just another short video that talks about a few models, and then I'll focus on one particular model to take you through the rest of the session. So let me just share this quick video with you all. Let me know when you're seeing my screen. And if you're hearing.
Of different models of reflection.
Are you all hearing?
All of which provide a slightly different way of looking back on experiences
Yes.
and learning from them. On a basic level, however, most of these models involve a cycle of reviewing experience, analyzing it, learning from it, and coming up with a new action or behavior. 4 models of reflection have been detailed here for you to choose from. First of all, Bortons' reflection model. It is possibly the simplest of the 4 models. What? So what? Now what? What is the description and self-awareness level of the experience? What actually happened? So what is the analysis and evaluation level? What is behind the experience? What are the outcomes? Now what is the synthesis level? Building on the outcomes of the previous 2, we try to come up with new alternative actions and behaviors. Kolb cycle. The first stage here is that of experience. It's concerned with the actual experience, what actually happened. Immerse yourself in the task. The second stage is the stage of reflection. It involves stepping back from the task and reviewing, analyzing, and judging the experience. What did I do? How did I feel about it? The third stage is that of conceptualization. is concerned with developing an understanding of what happened by seeking more information, interpreting the events, and understanding the relationships between them. And finally, the planning stage. It is concerned with taking this new understanding and using it to try out new ideas. The third model is that created by Hatton and Smith. They developed a 4-level developmental model of reflection. The first stage is descriptive writing. At this stage, describe the experience, but without analyzing it or giving any reasons for the actions you took. Think of the key processes and factors in this experience. The second stage is descriptive reflection. At this stage, give reasons for your actions based on your personal judgment. Do it in a reportive way. Why did you behave or react the way you did? How did you feel during this experience? What were you trying to achieve? The third stage is that of dialogic reflection. Dialogue with yourself, or with a friend, or coach, or a mentor. Look at possible reasons for your actions and feelings, and explore the experience by hypothesizing possible alternatives. What factors influenced your actions? What other choices did you have, and what would their consequences be? And finally, the stage of critical reflection. In this deepest level of reflection, try to arrive at a solution, action, or improvement by considering the impact of social, cultural, and historical influences on you and your behavior. And finally, the fourth and last model is that by Brookfield. Brookfield identified 4 activities central to learning how to be critically reflective. The first stage here is the assumption analysis. So our beliefs, values, cultural and social influences, all of these things have a great impact on the way we perceive reality and act. Think about what your beliefs, values, and cultural and social influences are. How do they impact your actions? The second stage is that of contextual awareness. This level of awareness is achieved when you come to realize that the assumptions you identified earlier have been created in a social, environmental, historical, and cultural context. The third level is that of imaginative speculation. Try to develop alternative behaviors. Imagine other ways of looking at and acting in a given situation. Explore as many alternatives for the given situation as possible. And finally, reflective skepticism. It is the outcome of the previous 3 activities. At this stage, put into question any universal truth claims. Just because something has been believed to be true does not make it true. Similarly, because something has been done in a particular way for years does not make it the best way of doing it.
So because something has been done a particular way. Woo, sorry about that. Sorry about that, folks. Yes, so because something has been done a particular way for years, doesn't mean that it has to continue to be done like that. So what did you all get from those models? I want to just hear in the chat, or if you want to share. Did it help you change any way, the way you thought about reflection, or has it validated your own thoughts about reflection? Just give me some of your thoughts. You could share in the chat, or if somebody wants to grab the mic, that'll be fine. Let me ask Camille, since Camille was the one who first spoke about taking the notes and journaling. Camille, do you see your approach in any of those models?
Yes, I definitely saw, and that's what I was thinking, that it is actually a standardized or normative thing where the note-taking helps with regards to the reflection process, because in documentation, you can always go back to it. You can add or modify or regroup, and it gives you the basis for contextual awareness, for example, which is what they talked about in the video with one of the models.
Right. And even the simple model, the what, the so what, the now what. If we think about your whole approach, and even what Kathy talked about, even if you're doing it at the end, you can use that reflection that you have to look at that, and using the model, look at, okay, so what is it I experience? And so what about this? And now what? So the models really provide
there was one
a framework. Yes, somebody else wants to say something?
No, sorry, my mic was on. My apologies.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, and I'm seeing Darren is saying it really validates his thoughts. Kathy got that different kinds of reflection might be appropriate at different times. Good. So all of that is valid. And I really wanted to show you that all the various models point to one thing. At the end of the day, it's about bringing together your thoughts to improve what's going to be happening for the students. And I'm focusing now on my slide there we're looking at Brookfield's model. Now, when they talked about Brookfield's model in the video, it really was about getting to increase self-awareness. And what I'm presenting here is in a later book, Brookfield wrote about the various lenses that we can use for reflection. And I want to focus on that because that takes us on this journey through to action research and even to you building yourself as a professional. So Brookfield talks about these 4 lenses. One is the autobiographical lens, or the self that you're seeing there. And Brookfield is saying that we can use our experiences as a student and how we've experienced teaching and learning to go through to understand ourselves better. What would be, now if we're looking at the autobiographical lens, through that lens, you know, our experiences, and we're using that as the foundation for the critical thinking. What would be sources for us to interrogate through that autobiographical lens? Just think about it for a while. If we're using an autobiographical lens, what are some of the sources that we can use to interrogate ourselves? And I'll just give you one hint. Camille's journaling. Writing a journal is one way to interrogate self, right? How else can we interrogate self? Think about it. I'll just leave it with you to ponder for now. So the autobiographical lens is one way that we do our reflection, one lens through which we do our reflection. Brookfield is also talking about the student lens. He's saying where when you engage with student feedback, you use student feedback, this can reveal teaching habits that may need adjustment. And so that's self-explanatory. And now, I mean, and if you look down the road, in terms of this week, you all are going to be doing a session on student feedback and using the software for the student feedback. Think about how then you will be using that feedback to reflect. So that's another lens that you'll be using. So the autobiographical lens where you're doing your journaling, the student lens where you can see through the eyes of the student through their feedback, either the formal feedback or even individual feedback in your classes. When you talk to them, you have various tools you can use for feedback from the students, informal feedback. How did the session go? What was hot, what was not, those kinds of approaches. Another lens Brookfield says we can use is our peers, our colleagues' experiences, advice, mentoring. Peers can help us see those hidden habits we have in teaching practice that we don't see ourselves. And friends can also support us in terms of getting confidence as we engage. So the peer lens is another lens that you need to consider. And again, I'm not putting a plug here for CETL, but when you do the peer review session, you can see it in terms of Brookfield's idea of the lenses through which we can reflect. And then the 4th lens he talks about is scholarship. And scholarship here refers to engaging not just with your colleagues, but with the scholarly literature that supports teaching, learning, education. And so Brookfield is saying that through these lenses, either individually or in a combination, these can form the foundation for deeper reflective practice that will, draw on the various aspects of our practice to help us improve, right? And so when we talk about reflecting through these various lenses, it's in an effort to evaluate. And when we talk about evaluation, I've just put up a definition there of what I'm thinking of. So it's not at heart about collecting evidence just to justify yourself. It's not about just measuring the worth of the courses and teachers, but you want to come to an understanding in order to improve student learning. And that's a quote from Ramsden. And I'm seeing Leroy is asking, which lens do you find naturally in your reflective process and which one is most difficult? And I think it's a timely question he's asking. And I'm going to go one further, and I'm going to give you a quick poll to find out which lens you use. So let's see if hopefully you're seeing the poll now. Yeah, okay, thanks, Justin. And you can answer, you can select more than one. So I'm waiting. 0 of 9. Right, I'm seeing people on now. All right, still a couple more people. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. Okay. Almost there, almost there. All right, so a lot of people use the self-autobiographical lens. Some use the student lens. Very few people use the peer lens, and even fewer use this scholarship lens. So I'm hoping that by the time the session ends, we'll see a difference. Okay, all right.
I have a question, just to follow up on that, because this is quite revealing, you know, in terms of that balance.
Yeah.
And what would we see as a good, healthy? It's not going to look the same for everyone, but I'd really love to see further up when we get to that session, how do we actually deal with the peer and the scholarship theory part? And oh yeah, some person say the student is most difficult for some of us, and I think Paola has her hand up as well.
I find the student lens most difficult because there's so many confounding factors and class sizes. Yeah. And then Paola had her hand up. Paola, you want to share?
Yes. When we started looking at the models, I realized that the first thing I look at is how I felt, like how I felt my class went, like a specific session or a specific activity that I have planned for my students. But also at the end of the course, I always reflect, because I noticed that the way I teach each course, it kind of varies every year, because every year a new cohort of students, they come with a different attitude. So the same approach that I had with last year's students is not the same approach that I have with this year's students. But when I was doing the poll, the last one, I realized that the one thing I usually don't do is get feedback from my colleagues. And funny enough, like if there is something I can't figure it out, I do comment with other colleagues, but from a different institution, or people who are teaching similar courses, but in a different place. But I don't tend to do it with my colleagues from my department or from my section. Somehow, sometimes, like just now thinking about it, I feel that maybe I believe that my approach is different to theirs. So maybe I would rather discuss these kind of things with somebody that I may feel like has a similar approach to mine. But then I'm now wondering, how healthy is that? Because you know, different approaches give you different insights.
Yeah.
So
But
that was something interesting.
I think that was very interesting. I want to hear, before I say anything, I want to hear from other people in the session, how they feel about peer, that peer, yes, peer reflection. Go ahead, Darren.
Yes, where I was before, it was a requirement that your peers would come in and sit in at least on one of your sessions, one of your classes, and give you feedback, not necessarily a critique, but give you feedback on where they felt you were strong, where they felt you needed to make adjustments. And they would give you little pointers, like perhaps, you know, and they would get there very early. And one of the pointers I got from one of my peers was that, you know, don't come for the class at the start of the class. Come a little bit before, interact with the students, you know, come like 5 minutes before, interact with the students, get to know your students on a different level. And so when I came to UE, I realized it's like, nobody cares what anybody does in the class. You know, your peers really don't care, you know, what you do. I mean, I cannot see in my department me asking one of my colleagues to come and sit in on one of these sessions and give me some feedback. That ain't gonna happen. So I'm wondering if it's something that can be, now where I was, it was institutionalized.
Yeah,
it
I
was
was going to
part
ask you
of
that.
our review process, you know, that counted in terms of review for tenure and all of that. You know, your peer reviews, because it was a formal review process where they would write a report afterwards and that kind of thing. And that happened once a semester. And it would not be the same person, and you would not know who it is until you showed up for class. You know, you would see them sitting there, or you may see them walking afterwards and just walk straight to the back and sit down. And they would stay for the entire session. You know, so I'm wondering why. I mean, it was very helpful for me in terms of professional development as a young faculty member.
Yes.
So I don't know, it's not impossible to do something like that here, but
it would have to be institutionalized from what you're saying, from your perspective, for it to,
let me show you my
implemented. Thank you, Darren. I see Ladena's hand is up.
Yes, hi, morning everybody. So I just wanted to say that actually this is the first time that I'm being introduced to the models. However, what I got from it, and I would probably tell you why I do any sort of reflection, because, you know, there's something that says insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. And so, you know, the primary things I rely on would be self-reflection and from the students. So last semester, I used to check in with them intermittently throughout the semester. You know, we do have the student staff liaison meetings, but we get feedback very late from those. So if I don't check in with them, how am I supposed to know if, you know, this thing is not working? You know, in terms of the peer feedback, I've never had anybody else come in to sit in, one of my colleagues come in to sit into the class. But I mean, I do ask sort of like the senior demonstrators, people that have been, you know, they are in that sort of instructional role or performing that instructional role. How did you find the session? What can we do better? But yeah, the peer feedback is not something that's practiced, but I can definitely see the value of it. And I've never used the scholarship, lens.
That lens, yeah. Okay. I'm seeing other hands went up.
Yeah, I'll be very short because I know that time constraints, but certainly this is, I wanted to do a quick plug in there for the reason why we are doing this, Darren, is in a meaningful way. We want to be intentional about making that shift, that pivot towards more intentional practices. So certainly we've had a discussion, myself and Dianne, we had a discussion initially as to the approach. And we think the velvet hammer approach and the sort of infecting our values and our love for these various things is a way of beginning to begin to change that, Darren. So certainly, even though we don't have an overarching culture of that, I think we do see the School of Humanities and Education. I think that's done quite well, but certainly we want it a little bit much more wider throughout the institution.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Leroy. And if it gets to the point where we do have to institutionalize, we would want it done in a way that people feel comfortable and they feel confident, okay? And I'm gonna get to peer assessment again in a little while. But I want to spend a little time, just a short time, talking about when we think about, remember I said, let me go back to this slide, that you're looking at evaluation as a point, part of the point of the reflection. You want to understand your teaching to improve the student learning. And when we talk about evaluation, what are we really evaluating? Think about that. Is it your performance as a lecturer? Is it the quality of the student learning? Is it the design of the curriculum? Is it the student experience overall? Is it your experience overall? Is it the facilities? So you have to think about what you are evaluating and then consider the lens that would best help, because Leroy was talking about, okay, so, some people not into the peer, so how do we do the combinations? Look at what it is evaluating and think about which lens would best help you do that evaluation at that point in time. So if you're looking at your performance as a lecturer, would you use all the lenses? And in terms of all the lenses, which one would you sort of place emphasis on at that point in time? And that's something for you to think about, because if you have to think about it, because if you're not comfortable in a particular space, it may not work in your favor. So you have to find the spaces where you're comfortable, but also try to bring to bear the areas that would support you in a way that allows the thing to make sense. So the autobiographical lens will help you consider your own experiences, especially your prior learning experiences. And so when you do that, it helps you think about what are the assumptions that guide you. Is it that, when you were taught, you felt, I never want to teach like this, and that's how you teach, and that's why you teach in that particular way? Is it that you had a particular teacher who you liked and you just adopted that style? So all of this has to go into your considerations as you use that autobiographical lens. And so using that autobiographical lens, these are some of the practices that help you process writing a teaching philosophy. And we know that that in itself is a process, and CETL can help you with that. So that is that self-reflective statement that helps you get at the root of your beliefs about teaching and learning. What is it I believe in as a teacher? And in fact, when you start to talk about what you believe in as a teacher, it then allows you to understand why you assess your students in a particular way, the judgments you make about your students and why. And when you write that down, you can look at it and say, well, do I need to start to think about this in a different way? So your teaching philosophy comes into play in that autobiographical lens. Your journaling, your teaching logs that comes into that autobiographical lens. And I see you all have a session at the end of the week on a teaching portfolio. That brings together a lot of different elements. And part of that, your philosophy and your approaches and the activities that you do really come out of that autobiographical lens, but you see other aspects of that portfolio come from other lenses. So the peer aspect of it, the scholarship of teaching aspect of it will all come into play in that teaching portfolio. So the reflective activity can lead to you not only enhancing the teaching, but clearly defining yourself as a practitioner through all these different activities that you could engage in, writing your philosophy, developing a portfolio, doing your consistent logging. The peer evaluation, think of it as a formative process, not something necessarily that you're using just for. And I think some people see it as judgment. I like that Darren shared. He started doing it early in his career, and he was able to use that to get critical. And when I say critical feedback, I don't mean critiques, but feedback that allowed him to develop as a practitioner, as a professional. It could involve more than 2 teachers. And Paula talked about using colleagues from another space. And nothing is wrong with using colleagues from another space. But as you yourself realize, Paula, that yes, you could use your colleagues from another space, but colleagues who are closer and in the same space may also have something to offer. So the approach with them may be a little bit different, or your evaluation, what you're asking of them, what you're evaluating with them may be a bit different to what you might want to use the other colleagues for. But there's a space for that as well. So when we talk about the peer evaluation, we want it to be collegial. So it's collaborative and collegial, but it must be that critical analysis of experience. And you'll see why, as I talk about action research, I'm taking a little while to get to it, but I need to build this foundation before we get to it. So this peer evaluation is critical, and I want you all to spend some time thinking about how it could be done if it's not a formal process by the university. And so how do you then move from, so we talked a lot about reflection. So how do we now move from reflection to action research? So to talk about that, we have to talk about what is action research, right? So it's really a methodology, as you can imagine. And it is concerned with change and improvement in practice. So it's some research is not necessarily about your practice, but this action research is about change and improvement in practice. And it's applied. So any action research project that you do, it must be in the form of some kind of intervention that you're thinking of to address an issue or problem to improve that problem in your practice. So the reflection is the starting point, because the reflection will help you identify the critical problem. And then using that reflection, identifying the critical problem, you could then come up with an action research project to treat with that, an intervention to treat with that problem or issue, all right? And again, remember, Leroy mentioned systematic at the beginning. Action research is disciplined inquiry. And so, again, I'm repeating, it's meant to inform your practice. And it's usually carried out within your environment with the students. So it could be at a school, at a community level, but it is connected to that context of your practice. And it can be individual. So you as a lecturer investigating a particular issue in your classroom. It could be collaborative, and here is where you can tie it in with your peer evaluation, because if you develop that group of, and I like to call them group of critical friends, who you all know each other, you all have been dealing with each other's teaching practice. So it's not simply a process of somebody coming in, looking at teaching and making comments. This is a group, a collegial group of critical friends who work on a common problem, because Paula, as in your case, if you're all in the same context and you all are teaching in the same department, you may have some of the same issues to deal with in terms of classroom management or the students' responses to certain interventions in the classroom. And so you could have an action research project that's collaborative. Or there could be a system-wide project where you get together with your external people, and it's an issue that impacts not just your department or classroom, but something that impacts teaching Spanish, the teaching of Spanish. And so that team could work together on a larger issue that's more general than specific classroom action research or collaborative action research. So these are the kind of levels of action research that you could engage in. So how do you identify that problem? Where do you start? Yes, Paula.
Sorry, Diane. So I have a question. For example, the problem that I I can research not necessarily has to do with my students or an issue in the classroom, but maybe I can look at, for example, the structure of the program. If I want to evaluate like how effective that is for my students' professional work.
Okay.
Can I study that?
All right. So if you want to study something like that, you have to identify what is the problem with it. You've reflected and there's some issue, there's something that's nagging at you. There's a gut feeling you have about something. So you have to define that problem. And then you have to think about, if this is the problem, what am I thinking is a possible intervention or solution to treat with it? And the action research will involve you trying to apply that. First, you have to verify that this thing is a problem. So that's the first level of the research, where you identify the problem and you kind of verify that it's a problem. And then you come up with an intervention that you think could deal with the problem. And that intervention, you apply it and you assess or evaluate how it's working. What is the result of applying that intervention? What's the outcome? So you interpret the data that tells you what's happening with that. And then the results of that, you could then say, so this is what has happened. Either you've addressed the problem, you haven't addressed the problem. What did you find out? And then the cycle starts again, because if you didn't address the problem, what were the issues? So you go back in and you can start your cycle again of action research until you improve it to the point where you're happy with the solution. You get it? So it doesn't have to be a classroom activity, but it does have to be something that you have identified as a problem, where you could come up with an intervention or something that you're applying to address the problem. That's why it's called applied research. So what are you applying to address the problem? And then when you do it, you evaluate the result, and then you go from there. You reflect again. So when you reflect again based on the results, what was the outcome? Did it improve? What do I need to do next? And then you go again. So does that help?
Yes, a lot. Thank you.
Okay, good. So that, thank you for that, Paula, because it allowed me to talk about the process, which is what I wanted to talk through on this slide. So that's the process. And well, Paula asked one question so far. Yes, Ladina, design thinking. Okay, so I'm gonna press on and you'll just interrupt me when you need to, because I want to get to this, the scholarship of teaching and learning. And that's important because, as we know, you all are lecturers here. The action research can help you improve your teaching, but at the end of the day, you also need to publish. Now, action research moves into scholarship of teaching and learning when you take it that step further. You take it a step further. So, scholarship of teaching and learning is really that formal inquiry into your students' learning or your practices, as what Paula talked about is actually part of her practice, but not necessarily directly the outcome of the learning, although it can be because she's talking about course design. But it becomes scholarship of teaching and learning when it's disseminated to others so that they might be able to modify their good practice, their practice. So if Paula engages in that research she talked about, and then she just does the cycle over and over for her own purposes, then it's simply action research. If Paula and her friends publish that research in a way that allows other teachers to use it to enhance their practice, then it becomes the scholarship of teaching and learning. I want to pause. Have I confused anybody yet, or are you all following? Let's see. I'm seeing in the chat. Everybody okay so far? Yeah, so I'm seeing some support here from Leroy, from Justin, right, and Camille is following. So the subtle inquiry into student learning, grounded in your context, it's methodologically sound because you're following the research tenets and design thinking, as Adina said. It's conducted in partnership with your students because you're getting their feedback. Remember, you first, with that gut feeling, you verified your hunch or your gut feeling first with the students before you moved on to craft your intervention and evaluate that intervention, right? Right, so all good, okay so far. So we're almost to the end. What I want to do is one quick video again. Yes, Camille, while you share what you think, what you want to ask, I'm going to just share a short video that talks about the scholarship of teaching and learning. So while I'm setting that up, you can ask a question or make your comment.
Okay, sure. One of the videos talks about social, reflecting on social and cultural values. I was wondering if this can also be included in the scholarship of teaching and learning, especially where you're looking at methodology and you're using the methodology and the theory to also assess the cultural and social values of the students as well as yours. So you're transforming your teaching practice through cultural self-reflection, for example.
Yes, yeah, and if you look at Brookfield's 4, it fits into that 4th theory scholarship lens. So it's theory scholarship lens. So that whole thing of taking in your context and the cultural background and all that fits nicely into that lens, as well as the lens of the student. Because student feedback is not only that, remember I said that formal feedback that we do with our Qualtrics and all that. The feedback is also getting the voice of the student. And getting the voice of the student requires you to be inclusive and to consider that cultural context of the student and all that. So yes, spot on, Camille. So let me share this short video. It's some academics talking about scholarship of teaching and learning. Y'all seeing my screen?
Yes.
Scholarship of teaching and learning that I use is that it is faculty undertaking systematic inquiry of learning in his or her own classroom. Every time a professor or a teacher teaches a course, they're engaged in an experiment. The syllabus is a hypothesis that if I teach the class this way, if I teach this material in this order, and if students do these things, then I hypothesize that something will happen. Students will learn, they'll grow, they'll benefit. And that's how we play out every single time we teach. What's missing is that final step of what an experimental mode would be, which is this is my hypothesis, this is the unfolding, and now I have to look very closely at the results and re-examine my hypothesis. So that loop closing happens always in some informal way. That didn't work, I'll never do that again. That was great, I'm always good on that day. Students love this. But we often don't undertake that loop in a very systematic way. So for me, the scholarship of teaching and learning is about taking that last step in the hypothesis testing that every act of teaching is, and picking some dimension, looking at it systematically, looking sensitively and rigorously at the evidence of student learning, and asking if the assumptions that are going into this learning design are correct and if there are things that I might do differently.
The key characteristic of subtle work for me is that it's a form of inquiry. Some people like the term research, some people prefer inquiry. It is certainly based on notions of reflective practice and reflecting on your teaching. That's the starting point. For me personally, subtle involves not just an inquiry into your teaching practices, but it has to have a focus on students' learning. So student learning is the actual focus of inquiry in subtle. That's my personal understanding of it.
A definition that I like is sort of as follows. It's faculty bringing their habits and skills as scholars to their work as teachers. So habits of asking questions, gathering evidence of all different kinds, drawing conclusions or raising new questions, and bringing what they learned through that to the thing they were looking at the first place, which is students learning and their own teaching, of course. So it's a kind of cycle, but it's essentially behaving as they do as a scholar in other settings and bringing that to their work as teachers.
The key characteristics of CETL really are bringing your research to your teaching in a systematic way, so that what you plan to do for your students, you carry out and you test and you figure out exactly their response and what might make their learning better.
Right, so I wanted to end on that note. What can make their learning better? And what I want to emphasize too is that you can use that process to enhance your publications as well. And I'll give you a concrete example. I mean, I worked with a member of staff in engineering, and it was because he had a gut feeling about something that was happening in his classroom, and he wanted to interrogate that, and he wanted to research, and we actually got a paper out of it. So it allows for you being able to, while you do your teaching, collect data that will allow you to also publish. So that's something that you can think about as well. So remember I mentioned about you getting those critical friends. So one of the things you can consider is coming together and forming a research cluster with your critical friends who could serve the purpose of peer evaluation, as well as working with you to work on your action research and engage in scholarship of teaching and learning. And so just to summarize, so we're looking at reflective practice as a foundation to enhance teaching and learning. We talked about the several models. We looked at Brookfield's 4 lenses, and we talked about self, and for you to start thinking about that philosophy of teaching that you have, and looking at how you could start developing your portfolio, and you know, maybe come and do that session to see how that will help you. We talked about the student feedback and through the student's eyes. So again, when you do that Qualtrics session, start to think about how you could use that formal assessment as well as your own informal assessments that you all have been talking about. We talked about the peer view. I know you all haven't been doing it formally, but you know, maybe there are 1 or 2 members of your department that you could get together with and start to think about how you could help each other in terms of the peer evaluation as well as the action research. And then the theory, start reading about it, start engaging with that to support the action research as well as the practice. Engaging in that practice could help in identifying your problems in the classroom, and doing those interventions and evaluating and continuing the cycle could help you address those issues. And the end result could not only be enhancing your teaching and learning, but also engaging in the scholarship of teaching and learning, which will help others to adopt good practices based on what you have found. And that's where I want to end. Somebody asked me to go back to the slide before the one on the research cluster. Okay. Kathy, best practices sometimes makes assumptions that are not relevant to our content. Yes, so Kathy, I agree with that totally. That's why we when we talk about best practices, don't necessarily mean that you will adopt things wholesale. The slide before the research cluster, this one?
No, the actual research cluster slide, sorry.
Oh, okay. Right.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a word here.
Okay, okay, yes. And one of the words that I want you to take with you are two words: critical friend. Critical friend. Right. So any questions or comments as we end? We stop sharing. A research cluster should be formed for teaching and practice. Well, then that would be a teaching cluster. And I think that this faculty, the faculty cafe that Leroy talks about, could be a good start for your teaching practice cluster. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great plug for it, actually. And we are so happy that we've been able to think and crowdsource our ideas. And I particularly, for me, and Dianne, is the whole idea of critical friends and being able to draw on that continuous. And I would also say that this scholarship, the actual literature and all those things can also be part of that critical on pinning, of those ideas that we may naturally be comfortable and uncomfortable with. And so Justin is saying, much like a community of practitioners. And so we certainly see that there. And we know that we have to end the session soon, but I certainly one key takeaway from me, and I'm inviting our colleagues in the chat room, if you can identify one or two key takeaways from you from this session. We will post a formal evaluation. We certainly want your feedback, because we think that you are part of our critical friends, and you can give us feedback in which we can actually strengthen and how we can strengthen to support and advance you. So we want to say a special thank you to Dr. Dianne Thurab-Nkhosi for doing an excellent job, and the if we can use our emoticons, as they call them, reactions, we just want to give you a round of applause. And you see in the hearts, you see in the hearts, you see in the hearts. That's great. We want to say thank you so much. We've been so much triggered to think critically after this session. And so in a very meaningful way, we want to say, what are your key takeaways? So Camille is saying a key takeaway is the action research and the different models. Any others? Can we see that? Delon says, thanks very much for an excellent session. We're seeing that. Let's put it in the chat. If you want, somebody wants to hold the mic, key takeaway, we'll give you 1 more minute for that. And then we will also post in the different lenses. Yes. And certainly, Darren, and I think that's where I ask the question is, so which one we normally go with first? And oftentimes we start with self and stay with self.
Yeah.
And stay with self. And stay with self. And so I really value that kind of balance. And I think sometimes we may choose to start without self and actually end with self. And some persons actually do that as well. Javed is saying critical friend. And I was quite happy to hear it, because I've used that term previously and always, but it's great to see that that's some resonance and using that term, because certainly in the peer observation process, we want to value that. And because we value that here at CETL, we've thought it best to introduce it through our, the soft launch. And I mean, Dianne, we spoke that was the best approach in terms of, rather than the firm institutionalization of these different things, we think of, obviously we have integrated it within the CETL program. But certainly we think that you can be ambassadors. The 13 of us here can be ambassadors for ensuring that we really tell our peers and encourage and value these different things. All right. I should start moving from gut feeling to actual research. So this is great, Paola. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Spot. And thank you for a thought-provoking session. Again, I think this session was very informative session. So that's been taken there. All right. So again, there is a link, and I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Mark Garcia, who is in the session. He's a research technician. So Mark, thank you for putting that. We really want to invite you to really give us your thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs, well, you know, I'm not going to use the thumbs down, but
No.
thumbs up and thumbs sideways, what we could dovetail. Where could we pivot to? What, you know, I know some of you got some ideas when we're doing the session. What could we do? Because we really want to serve you. We really want to serve you. And again, thank you for that, that opportunity. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Perhaps, I don't know if anyone else wants to say any concluding words, and then we will exit.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
and what I will perhaps do is to give a plug in for our other sessions. Please join us tomorrow. We're gonna a little deeper, a reminder. Thanks, Justin. Reflective practice and peer observation. We're gonna dig deeper yet into it in the whole process. And then we have the analyzing student evaluation. So Mr. Garcia, we'll be doing that session for us on Wednesday. And so that please bring up a friend along. I mean, we've taken a lot of effort to really plan this. We've gone far and we've really gone a lot of far and put our effort into doing this. And we have an exciting new pathway we want to introduce, which is the UB Faculty Cafe, which is disruptive, but it's supposed to be a means of having us reflect. And that's why it's very short. It's 30 minutes. You will get the opportunity to go and do 3 different sessions, 3 different tables, and in a very meaningful way. We're really looking forward to returning back to face-to-face. We can actually mimic this and have tables that persons could just rotate around 3 times for 30 minutes each. So it will, in the digital sense, we'll be doing that, going around tables. And we have different speakers. We have Dr. Zephyrin will be holding a table, right? And I really want to encourage you to register. We are going to close it because we are mindful of the numbers, and it's supposed to be a small, intimate, that you're supposed to have X amount of persons, 6 to 8 persons per table, and you would learn about how a faculty or how someone actually uses something to enhance their practice, and it's sort of a joint venture of reflecting as well. So, and then on Friday, Dr. Zephyrin and Mr. Mohammed will be teaching this session, which is creating your e-portfolio, and we certainly encourage you to do that. And we have an exciting the UE and the Guardian collaboration, and so we certainly preparing you for that. You can actually submit your portfolio to be part of the teaching award scheme. All right, so I don't know if I forgot anything else, and colleagues, do remind me, but thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you in one of our other sessions. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Bye, everybody.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.